Today we're going to be playing a meeting engagement on this map here in Combat Mission Final Blitzkrieg. We have set the weather to random, and it has rolled a very cold day with a dry ground, but also dense fog, which is going to give both myself and my opponent some interesting difficulties during this one. My deployment zone will be over on this edge of the map, coming across through the village in the middle here, with my opponent starting on this opposite side of the map. He does have a bit of a ridge that is going to overlook the village. However, the fog is probably going to negate this advantage, but once we get into the game, we'll see exactly how that impacts us. For this game, I'm playing as the Americans, with my opponent taking the German army. I brought a cut-down parachute battalion, with A Company having all 3 platoons and B Company being reduced to 1 platoon. I also have a pair of M36 Jacksons and a 76mm Sherman EZ-8, as well as 4 105mm howitzers on call, 3 target reference points, and for some reason I opted to bring a P-47D to do some strafing. In the fog. B Company's 1 platoon will swing left, and A Company 3rd platoon will swing right in order to secure the forest to prevent any Germans from sneaking around behind me. A Company 1st and 2nd platoon will go straight into the village, with parts of 1st platoon mounted on the Sherman. The 3 TRPs are set up across the village and on the ridge overlooking at it. Starting off in turn 1 here, we have all of our troops heading out to their initial positions. Again, nice and foggy, going to be restricting visibility by quite a fair amount. I believe visibility was approximately 180 meters. And here, right off the bat, even though it is nice dry ground and cold, we have an M36 who has been bogged down, spinning his tracks there, trying to get out. This is a bit of a moment of panic for me, but he does eventually get himself unstuck and starts moving off to position again. Also, my opponent has opted to start dropping smoke into the tree line here, probably for the same reasons that I brought a aircraft to strafe with. I didn't know how bad the fog was going to be, and this smoke is largely going to be useless. But that is it for turn 1. Kicking off into turn 2, we have everyone continuing along their paths. Got the squad mounted up on the Sherman here, going for a little bit of a ride. And you might even be able to start hearing the plane overhead, who is going to circle around above the fog, looking for targets to strafe, and be very unsuccessful in doing so. I don't actually think he manages to find any targets for the duration of the game. The M36 over here using its speed to get into position. And he's just gonna park himself right here and watch this hill. I have also started to call in an artillery barrage right on this TRP here. I'm hoping that in 5 minutes when it arrives should be right around the time that the first German troops are starting to filter in. Given that the visibility is so poor due to the fog, I've actually opted to move this M36 forward. It was only able to see to the edge of the buildings here, which wasn't going to be very useful. So I'm moving him up to use this building as cover, so he will look out in this direction and cover the road on the way in. Which ended up being a good decision because he spots some German infantry moving into the town here, landing a solid hit with his 90mm, and catches another one and also deletes him. So you can see you're starting to spot some more corpses in this field. Looks like it was a direct hit onto that squad. The only downside to these is they only carry 11 HE rounds, so they do have limited anti-infantry capability. And there's another shot into this building at some Germans that just ran in there. So already 3 of his 11 shells used, but hopefully those got some good casualties in. The rest of our infantry is starting to get into position. Platoon coming in across the field here. I got more guys taking up position in these trees, and the Sherman has dropped off the passengers. And once again, we're seeing more Germans filtering into town. And I have all these infantry squads just taking up positions in these buildings to cover the road. We do spot some Germans moving in the field, and we begin to take some casualties with one guy going down. The Jackson, however, is continuing to fire as Germans come across this road. And in the back, we start to get a sound contact of an enemy vehicle. So just do a quick review at the end of the turn here of what we've spotted. Looks like we have some German infantry laying down in the field here. So these guys are just armed with rifles. Over on this side, the guys that we've been killing here are armed with STG-44s. So these guys have assault rifles, so that's going to be a Sturm platoon that's moved into town. This guy here appears to have decided he has better chances running away and has started to flee. My guys in position on the tree line there have also begun to open fire. The M36 on this side is now joined in and starting to lob some 90mm HE into the buildings. Fortunately, my flamethrower is going to take a hit here and lose the gunner, but not the flamer itself. And some casualties coming into the building, this squad breaking almost immediately as a mass of Germans in the field all target his building. Got the Sherman moving around to try and provide some fire support. And the rest of the infantry that have now reached the village are going to start running up towards this way. Unfortunately, I had not spotted the teams up in this area when I gave them their orders, and they run into a hail of machine gun fire. Then, up in this direction, I've got my troops setting up in the forest. So definitely a lot of Germans out in this field. I'm going to have to get some reinforcements going. These guys here, unfortunately, due to the fog, don't have any vision into this area here, so they're going to have to get closer if they want to be effective. And now my artillery is starting to come down on the few buildings that the Germans have occupied. My flamethrower there, having a good time. Let's actually pause that and go back a little bit here, and let us watch this again. So we got some German contacts in these buildings here, and the flamethrower is just going to light them on fire. You can hear the screams. I've moved my Sherman up. It's now getting some fire in onto the fields and just shredding infantry. Tons of firepower going back and forth here. These German squads have plenty of machine guns in them, so they are getting some good shots in themselves. It's just with my two tanks here, they are definitely getting the worst end of it on the German side. And as expected, the Germans did try to infiltrate this forest, and we got some fire going on. Get a look of our infantry coming in here. The American paratroopers have a pretty good loadout for close quarters fighting, so they're probably going to have the advantage, but you can see one casualty here, and this squad has lost quite a few men. These guys are tired because they just ran across the field, but even over here we got some firing going back and forth and inflicting some casualties on our opponent. There is an absolute ton of German infantry coming in through this field here and into the forest. Down on this side, I'm starting to get my infantry to move in to occupy these buildings. My mortars, 60mm mortars, are starting to drop shells into the field here. Artillery still coming down. Whatever the sound contact is starting to advance on me, so a little bit nervous about that. But for the most part, it looks like I've sort of taken advantage with the weight of fire here and getting around to the sides to keep shooting reinforcements coming in up the roads. Fortunately, the lead squad there in the forest taking a grenade, I believe, and lost most of them. Even some of the squads down the hedge line here starting to take some casualties. And after that turn, my opponent has determined that he will not be able to reclaim the village from me, as he has just a couple teams in the end of the village, and he didn't think he had enough to get back in with me occupying all the buildings, so he has surrendered. And the end here is I have 15 killed and 8 wounded, versus my opponent with 57 killed, 39 wounded, and 3 surrendered. I believe those surrendered after they got hit by the flamethrowers. So we hit review map. We can take a look at our final positions here. The first thing I noticed is he has a lot of infantry, and it appears his plan was to line this ridge with machine guns and use that to help control the village. Unfortunately, due to the fog, that strategy did not work at all, and yeah, he took a lot of losses trying to get into the village. They're just stacked up here in this field. And the initial shots from the Jackson, looks like it got 4 guys with first shell. He did have this Yag Panther, which never got close enough to get a spot. So that was actually fortunate. I had brought the Jacksons to deal with something like a Panther or Yag Panther. Is unable to take a Pershing, which would have been my first choice due to the time that we were set. And there we have it, just 7 minutes into this game.